When 13-year-old Nathan answered the CEO's phone while his mother cleaned nearby, he had no idea that one call would change their lives forever. What happened next left everyone in tears. The fluorescent lights of the Whitmore Industries building cast long shadows across the marble floors as Carmen pushed her cleaning cart down the empty hallway. It was nearly 9 o'clock at night, and the building had transformed from the bustling hub of corporate activity it was during the day into a silent cathedral of glass and steel. She preferred it this way. The quiet allowed her to think, to plan, to dream of a future that seemed perpetually just out of reach. Her son Nathan walked beside her, his backpack slung over one shoulder, a thick textbook tucked under his arm. At 13, he was tall for his age, with intelligent brown eyes that seemed to absorb everything around him. He had his mother's determination etched into his young features, a certain set of the jaw that spoke of resilience beyond his years. "Mom, I finished the practice problems for your accounting exam," Nathan said, keeping his voice low even though the floor appeared empty. "There's a tricky one about depreciation that I think might show up on the test." Carmen smiled, her heart swelling with a complicated mixture of pride and guilt. Pride because her son was brilliant, genuinely brilliant, the kind of smart that teachers noticed and tried to nurture. Guilt because instead of doing homework for his own advanced classes, he spent his evenings helping her study for the degree she had abandoned when she got pregnant at 22. "You should be focusing on your own studies, sweetheart," she said softly, unlocking the supply closet to retrieve fresh trash bags. "Your grades matter more than mine. My grades are fine, Mom, and your degree matters too. Once you finish, you can get a better job. Maybe we can finally move out of Aunt Rosa's basement." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken struggles. They had been living with Carmen's sister for almost 2 years now, ever since the landlord had raised the rent on their small apartment beyond what Carmen could afford. Rosa was kind, never complained about the extra mouths to feed, but Carmen could see the strain it put on her sister's modest household. She wanted more for Nathan. She wanted more for herself. "Go sit in the break room and do your homework," Carmen instructed, pulling on her rubber gloves. "I need to clean the executive floor tonight. Mr. Whitmore's assistant was very specific about having everything spotless for some big meeting tomorrow. Can I come with you? I'll be quiet. I just want to see the view from the top floor." Carmen hesitated. Technically, Nathan was not supposed to be in the building at all, but the night security guard, old Mr. Patterson, had known Carmen for years and looked the other way when she brought her son during late shifts. It was better than leaving a 13-year-old alone in a basement apartment, even one in a safe neighborhood. "Fine, but you touch nothing, understand? Nothing. These executives notice everything, and I cannot afford to lose this job." Nathan nodded solemnly. He understood more than most kids his age what losing a job would mean for them. He remembered the months after his mother lost her position at the restaurant, how she had hidden her tears while serving them smaller and smaller portions at dinner, how he had pretended not to notice when she skipped meals entirely so he could eat. They took the service elevator to the 50th floor, where the executive suite occupied the entire level. When the doors opened, Nathan caught his breath. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, lights twinkling like earthbound stars against the dark sky. The furniture was sleek and modern, the artwork on the walls probably worth more than his mother would earn in a lifetime. "Wow," he whispered. "Impressive, isn't it?" Carmen said, though her tone carried a note of weariness rather than wonder. She had cleaned these floors for 3 years now, and had long since stopped being awed by the luxury. What she noticed instead were the coffee stains on the conference table, the fingerprints on the glass doors, the small indignities that the wealthy left for people like her to clean up, without acknowledgement or thanks. Nathan found a corner near the window, away from anything important looking, and settled down with his textbook. But his eyes kept wandering to the massive desk that dominated the corner office. Through the glass walls, he could see the nameplate, James Whitmore, CEO. "Mom, is that the guy who owns everything?" "Mr. Whitmore, yes. He built this company from nothing 30 years ago." Carmen spoke while methodically wiping down surfaces in the conference room. "They say he started with just a small loan and a big dream. Now he is one of the richest men in the state. Have you ever met him?" "Once. He came in late one night about a year ago. Looked right through me like I was part of the furniture." There was no bitterness in her voice, just a matter-of-fact acceptance that stung Nathan more than anger would have. To men like him, people like us are invisible. Nathan frowned, processing this information. At school, his teachers talked about hard work and determination being the keys to success. But watching his mother work harder than anyone he knew and still struggle to make ends meet made him question those simple narratives. The sound of the elevator chiming interrupted his thoughts. Carmen's head snapped up, her expression shifting to one of alarm. "Quick, behind the plant," she hissed, gesturing to a large potted fern near the window. "No one is supposed to be here this late." Nathan scrambled to hide, just as the elevator doors opened, and James Whitmore himself strode onto the floor, followed by his executive assistant, Linda. Even at this hour, James was impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Carmen's annual salary. His silver-streaked hair was perfectly styled, and he walked with the confident gait of a man who had never been told no. "I don't care what time it is in Tokyo," James was saying into his phone, his voice sharp with irritation. "Tell Nakamura that if he wants to back out of this deal, he can explain it to his board of directors when their stock price tanks. This acquisition has been 18 months in the making." Linda hurried behind him, tablet in hand, her heels clicking against the marble floor. "Sir, the legal team has prepared the revised terms you requested, and the cleaning service assured me the conference room would be ready for tomorrow's video call." Carmen had frozen mid-wipe, her cloth pressed against the conference table. James barely glanced at her as he passed, his attention focused entirely on his phone conversation. "Yes, I am aware of the cultural sensitivities," James continued, irritation mounting in his voice. "That's why we agreed to a midnight call to accommodate their time zone. But if Nakamura thinks he can renegotiate at the 11th hour, he has another thing coming." He disappeared into his office, slamming the door behind him. Linda paused, noticing Carmen for the first time. "You, cleaning woman. I need this floor spotless in 20 minutes. Mr. Whitmore has an extremely important call tonight, and everything must be perfect." Her tone carried the kind of dismissive authority that made Carmen's jaw tighten. "Yes, ma'am. I'm almost finished." Linda's eyes swept the room, landing briefly on the corner where Nathan was hiding. Her brow furrowed. "Is there someone else here?" Carmen's heart stopped. "No, ma'am. Just me. I could have sworn I saw—" Linda shook her head, dismissing the thought. "Never mind. Just finish up quickly and use the service elevator when you leave. Mr. Whitmore cannot be disturbed." She strode toward the CEO's office, knocking once before entering and closing the door behind her. Carmen exhaled shakily. "Nathan, you need to go downstairs right now. Wait for me in the lobby." Nathan emerged from behind the plant, his face pale. "Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cause trouble." "It's not your fault. But please, just go. I'll be done in 15 minutes. Nathan gathered his things quickly, but as he passed the CEO's office, he could hear raised voices through the door. James Whitmore was clearly agitated, pacing back and forth while Linda took notes. "The entire Asian expansion depends on this deal," James was saying. "If Nakamura pulls out, we lose our foothold in the Japanese market. 3 years of work, billions in projected revenue, gone." Nathan knew he should keep walking. His mother's job depended on him being invisible, on not causing any problems, but something made him pause, made him listen. "The call is scheduled for 11:45 tonight," Linda said. "That gives us 2 hours to prepare our final offer." 2 hours to save the most important contract of my career," James muttered. "And Nakamura is the most traditional businessman I've ever dealt with. One wrong word, one sign of disrespect, and he walks away." Nathan finally moved toward the elevator, his mind racing. He knew about Japanese business culture from his mother's international business textbook. He had helped her study that chapter just last week, fascinated by the intricate protocols and the importance of relationship building in Asian commerce. The concept of saving face, the significance of hierarchy and respect, the way negotiations were conducted through layers of indirect communication. Knowledge that felt purely academic when he was quizzing his mother now seemed suddenly, urgently relevant. He pressed the elevator button, watching the numbers climb toward the 50th floor. Behind him, his mother worked quickly and quietly, erasing any evidence of their presence from the executive suite. Neither of them knew that in just a few hours, everything would change. The elevator arrived, and Nathan stepped inside. But instead of pressing the button for the lobby, he found himself pressing the button for the 49th floor, where he knew there was a small waiting area with comfortable chairs. He would stay close, he told himself, just in case his mother needed him, just in case something happened. It was a decision that would alter the course of 3 lives forever. 2 hours later, Nathan was still on the 49th floor, unable to sleep despite his exhaustion. His textbook lay open on his lap, but he had read the same paragraph about supply chain management 7 times without absorbing a word. His mind kept returning to the conversation he had overheard, to the desperation in James Whitmore's voice, to his mother working silently above him, invisible and unappreciated. The building was even quieter now, if that was possible. Most of the security lights had dimmed to their nighttime settings, casting the hallways in a soft, amber glow. Nathan could hear the distant hum of the ventilation system, the occasional creak of the building settling, the muffled sound of traffic from the street far below. He checked his phone. 11:32. The big call would be starting in 13 minutes. Just then he heard it, a sound that didn't belong, a muffled thump from somewhere above him, followed by what might have been a cry of alarm. Nathan sat up straighter, his heart beginning to pound. Then his mother's voice, distant but unmistakable, calling out in panic. "Help! Someone help! Call an ambulance!" Nathan was on his feet and running before he consciously made the decision to move. He bypassed the elevator entirely, slamming through the stairwell door and taking the steps 2 at a time. His lungs burned, his legs ached, but he didn't slow down. His mother needed him. Nothing else mattered. He burst onto the 50th floor to find chaos. James Whitmore was on the ground outside his office, his face ashen, one hand clutched to his chest. Linda was kneeling beside him, her phone pressed to her ear, speaking rapidly to what sounded like emergency services. And his mother was there too, her rubber gloves still on, her face streaked with tears. He just collapsed, Carmen was saying to no one in particular. He was walking to the conference room for his call and he just fell. I think it's his heart. Nathan skidded to a halt, taking in the scene. James was conscious but clearly in distress, his breathing shallow and labored. Linda was giving the address to the 911 operator, her voice professionally calm despite the fear in her eyes, and then the phone on the conference table began to ring. Everyone froze. The shrill sound cut through the tension like a knife, demanding attention that no one could give. "The call," James gasped, trying and failing to push himself up. "Nakamura, the contract." "Sir, you need to stay still," Linda said firmly, pressing him back down. "The ambulance is on its way. If I don't take that call, if Nakamura thinks I'm ignoring him, the deal is dead." James's voice was barely above a whisper, but the desperation in it was clear. 18 months of work, thousands of jobs. "Linda, you have to—" "I don't speak Japanese, sir, and I don't have the authority to negotiate on your behalf. Only you can close this deal." The phone continued to ring, each shrill tone a countdown to disaster. Nathan watched the scene unfold, his brilliant young mind processing information at lightning speed. He thought about what he had heard earlier, about the importance of this call, about the cultural sensitivities involved. He thought about his mother's textbook, about the chapter on Japanese business etiquette that he had practically memorized. He thought about what it meant to be invisible, to be overlooked, to have people look right through you as if you didn't exist. And then, before he could talk himself out of it, Nathan walked to the conference table and picked up the phone. "Nathan, no!" Carmen's voice was sharp with fear, but it was too late. Her son had already pressed the answer button on the conference phone, and the line was live. For a moment, there was only the soft crackle of an international connection, the weight of thousands of miles compressed into a single electronic signal. Then a voice, formal and measured, speaking in heavily accented English. "This is Yamamoto, speaking on behalf of Nakamura-san. We are ready to proceed with the conference. Is Whitmore-san available?" Nathan's heart was pounding so hard he was certain everyone in the room could hear it. He glanced at James, who was staring at him with a mixture of horror and desperate hope. He looked at Linda, whose face had gone completely white, and he looked at his mother, who seemed frozen in place, her hands still pressed over her mouth. He was 13 years old. He was the son of a cleaning woman. He had absolutely no business being on this call, but he knew things. He had spent countless hours helping his mother study, absorbing information about business and finance and international commerce like a sponge. He understood in ways that surprised even himself how negotiations worked, how respect was conveyed, how deals were made and broken through subtle signals that had nothing to do with the words being spoken. "Yamamoto-san," Nathan said, and his voice came out steadier than he expected. I am speaking on behalf of Whitmore-san. He has asked me to extend his deepest apologies. and to convey his profound respect for Nakamura-san and the entire Nakamura Corporation. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Nathan could almost feel the confusion, the suspicion, the potential offense at being addressed by someone other than the CEO himself. He pressed on quickly, drawing on everything he had learned. Whitmore-san has been called away by an urgent medical matter. He considers this call to be of the utmost importance, which is why he has entrusted me to ensure that Nakamura-san's time is not wasted. He wishes me to express that he views this potential partnership not merely as a business arrangement, but as the beginning of a relationship that will honor both companies for generations to come. The words flowed out of him as if someone else was speaking, as if the hours spent quizzing his mother on Japanese business culture had prepared him for exactly this moment. He remembered the textbook's emphasis on relationship building, on the concept of saving face, on the importance of showing respect even when delivering difficult news. Another pause. Then Yamamoto spoke again, his tone slightly less formal. "You speak with unexpected wisdom for someone who is not the principal negotiator. May I ask who I am addressing?" Nathan hesitated. The truth would end this conversation immediately. A 13-year-old boy had no standing in a billion-dollar negotiation. But a lie would be worse. In Japanese business culture, honesty and integrity were foundational. Being caught in a deception would doom not just this call but any future relationship. "My name is Nathan," he said finally. I am the son of one of Mr. Whitmore's employees. I happened to be present when the medical emergency occurred, and I answered the call because I did not want Nakamura-san to think his time was not valued." He heard a sharp intake of breath from Linda. His mother made a small sound of distress. James Whitmore, still lying on the floor, was watching him with an expression Nathan couldn't read. The silence on the phone stretched for what felt like an eternity. Then, unexpectedly, Nathan heard another voice in the background, older, more authoritative, speaking rapid Japanese. He caught only fragments, his knowledge of the language limited to the business terms and phrases from his mother's textbook, but he heard his own name repeated, and a tone that sounded more curious than angry. Yamamoto came back on the line. "Please hold. Nakamura-san wishes to speak with you directly." Nathan felt his knees go weak. Mr. Nakamura himself, the head of the Nakamura Corporation, one of the most powerful businessmen in Japan, and he wanted to speak to a 13-year-old cleaning woman's son from a basement apartment in the city. A new voice came through the speaker, older and deeper, with a gravitas that commanded immediate attention. "Nathan-san." The honorific, usually reserved for equals or superiors, made Nathan's breath catch. "I am told you answered this call out of respect for my time. Is this true?" "Yes, sir. Yes, Nakamura-san." Nathan stumbled slightly over the formal address. "I know how important this partnership is to Mr. Whitmore, and I know that in your culture, failing to honor a scheduled meeting would be a serious sign of disrespect. I did not want you to think that Whitmore Industries does not value this relationship. And how does the son of an employee come to know so much about my culture?" Nathan glanced at his mother, who was still frozen in place, tears streaming down her face. "My mother is studying for her business degree, sir. I help her with her homework. We read a chapter about international business practices last week. It was very interesting." There was a sound on the other end that might have been a chuckle. "You help your mother with her homework. And yet here you are, speaking to me about billion-dollar contracts. Tell me, Nathan-san, what do you think makes a good business partnership?" The question caught Nathan off guard. He had expected anger, dismissal, perhaps a quick termination of the call. He had not expected to be taken seriously. "I think," he paused, gathering his thoughts, "I think a good partnership is like any good relationship. It is not just about what each side can get from the other. It is about mutual respect, about understanding, about wanting the other person to succeed because their success becomes your success too." He thought about his mother and him, studying together late into the night, about Aunt Rosa who had taken them in without hesitation, about the teacher at school who had noticed his potential and spent extra time helping him prepare for the gifted program. "My mom says that real value is not about money," Nathan continued. "It is about people, about treating everyone with dignity, even when they cannot give you anything in return." The silence that followed was different from before, less tense, more contemplative. "Nathan-san," Nakamura said finally, "I have negotiated with some of the most powerful businessmen in the world, men who have studied at the finest universities, who have decades of experience, who can recite financial projections and market analyses from memory, and yet few of them have ever spoken to me about the true nature of partnership with such clarity. Nathan didn't know how to respond to that, so he stayed quiet. Tell me about Whitmore-san's medical condition. Is he able to communicate at all? Nathan looked at James, who had managed to prop himself up against the wall with Linda's help. The color was slowly returning to his face, and his breathing seemed less labored. The initial crisis appeared to be passing, though the man still looked far from well. He's conscious, sir. I think he might be able to speak briefly if you wished. Put him on. Nathan carried the conference phone over to where James sat. The CEO looked up at him with an expression that had shifted from shock to something approaching wonder. Nakamura-san, James said, his voice weak but clear. I apologize for the circumstances of this call. I assure you that... Whitmore-san, Nakamura interrupted gently, your young friend has already apologized most eloquently on your behalf. I called this meeting tonight because I had concerns about this partnership, concerns about whether Whitmore Industries truly understood the values that Nakamura Corporation holds dear. James closed his eyes briefly. I understand if you wish to terminate negotiations. On the contrary, what I witnessed tonight has addressed my concerns more thoroughly than any presentation or proposal ever could. When you were incapacitated, a child stepped forward. Not an executive, not a lawyer, but a child, and he spoke to me of respect, of dignity, of partnerships built on mutual understanding rather than mere profit. Nakamura paused. This tells me more about the culture of your company than 1,000 documents ever could. It tells me that somewhere in your organization there are people who understand what truly matters, people who raise children to value others, to act with integrity even when no one is watching, to treat a foreign businessman with the same respect they would show anyone else. Nathan felt his mother's hand on his shoulder, squeezing gently. He looked up to see fresh tears in her eyes, but her expression had changed. The fear and worry had been replaced by something fiercer, something that looked almost like pride. Whitmore-san, Nakamura continued, I propose that we proceed with the partnership as planned, but I have one condition. Name it, James said immediately. I would like to know more about this remarkable young man and his mother. In my country, we believe that the measure of a company is not found in its boardrooms, but in how it treats its most vulnerable members. The cleaning woman and her son who would sacrifice their own security to protect the honor of a man who has never even noticed them, this speaks to something valuable, something worth protecting. James looked up at Carmen, and for perhaps the first time since she had started working at Whitmore Industries, he truly saw her. Not as a nameless figure pushing a cart through empty hallways, but as a mother, a student, a woman of dignity and strength who had raised an extraordinary child under difficult circumstances. I think, James said slowly, that I have a great deal to learn about my own company, and about the people who make it run. The sound of sirens filtered up from the street below. The ambulance had arrived. Linda was already moving toward the elevator to escort the paramedics up. The medical team is here, Nathan said into the phone. Mr. Whitmore needs to go to the hospital. Of course, please tell him that I look forward to concluding our negotiations when he has recovered. And, Nathan-san. Yes, sir. Thank you for answering the call. The line went quiet. Nathan set down the phone with hands that had finally begun to shake, the adrenaline that had sustained him through the impossible conversation beginning to fade. His mother pulled him into a tight embrace. Sweetheart, what did you do? What did you just do? I don't know, Mom. His voice was muffled against her shoulder. I didn't want them to think you weren't important. I didn't want them to forget about us. The elevator doors opened and paramedics rushed onto the floor with a stretcher. They moved with practiced efficiency, checking James's vital signs, asking questions, preparing to transport him to the hospital. Linda followed behind them, her phone already out, making calls to board members and family. But James's eyes never left Nathan and Carmen. Wait, he said to the paramedics. Just one moment. He reached out a hand toward Carmen, who approached hesitantly. What is your name? Carmen, sir. Carmen Rodriguez. Carmen. He said it slowly, as if committing it to memory. Your son just saved my company. He saved thousands of jobs, billions of dollars, years of work. And he did it because you raised him to believe that everyone deserves respect. Carmen didn't know how to respond. 3 years of being invisible, of being looked through as if she didn't exist, and now the CEO himself was speaking to her as if she mattered. "When I get out of the hospital," James continued, "I want to talk to both of you about your future, about opportunities that have nothing to do with cleaning floors." He paused, his expression softening. "I built this company from nothing because someone once gave me a chance when no one else would. It seems I had forgotten that until tonight." The paramedics lifted him onto the stretcher, and Linda ushered them toward the elevator. "I'll call you tomorrow," she said to Carmen, and there was something different in her voice now, something that sounded almost like respect. Then they were gone, and Carmen and Nathan were alone on the 50th floor, surrounded by the luxury that had always seemed so far out of reach. "Mom?" Nathan's voice was small, uncertain. "Are we in trouble?" Carmen laughed, a sound that surprised both of them. "No, sweetheart, I don't think we're in trouble." She looked around at the gleaming offices, the panoramic windows, the evidence of wealth and power that she had spent years cleaning without ever feeling entitled to touch. "I think maybe, for the first time in a long time, we might be exactly where we're supposed to be." Outside the windows, the city lights continued to twinkle, indifferent to the small drama that had unfolded in this glass tower. But for Nathan and Carmen, everything had changed. A phone call answered by a child had set in motion events that neither of them could yet imagine. And somewhere in Tokyo, an elderly businessman smiled to himself as he thought about the cleaning woman's son who had spoken to him of respect and dignity and the true meaning of partnership. In all his years of business, he had never received a more valuable lesson about what really mattered. The night was far from over, but the morning that awaited them would be brighter than either Nathan or Carmen had dared to dream. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of unexpected events. James Whitmore had suffered a minor heart attack, the doctors said, brought on by stress and years of neglecting his health in favor of building his empire. He would recover fully with rest and lifestyle changes, but the incident had shaken him in ways that went beyond the physical. From his hospital bed, he made 2 phone calls that would set everything else in motion. The first was to his legal team, instructing them to finalize the Nakamura deal exactly as discussed, with a personal note of thanks to be included with the documents. The second was to Linda, asking her to arrange a meeting with Carmen Rodriguez and her son for the moment he was discharged. Carmen received the message while she was mopping the lobby floor of her sister's apartment building, a weekend job she had taken to supplement her nighttime cleaning work. Her hands trembled as she read the text from an unknown number, elegant and professional in its phrasing. "Mr. Whitmore requests the pleasure of your company for dinner at his residence this Saturday evening. A car will be sent to collect you and Nathan at 5 o'clock. Please dress comfortably. This is not a formal occasion." She read it 3 times before believing it was real. Nathan was equally stunned when she showed him. Since the night of the phone call, he had been oscillating between pride in what he had accomplished and terror that he had overstepped in some catastrophic way. The invitation felt like vindication and verdict rolled into one. "What do we even wear to a billionaire's house?" he asked, looking through his meager wardrobe with dismay. His nicest shirt had a small stain on the cuff from a science experiment gone wrong. "We wear what we have and we hold our heads high," Carmen said firmly. "Mr. Whitmore did not invite us because of our clothes. He invited us because of who we are." But she spent an hour that night carefully ironing Nathan's best pants and her own simple dress, wanting them to look presentable, even if they could not look wealthy. Saturday arrived with the kind of crisp autumn weather that made everything feel fresh and full of possibility. At precisely 5 o'clock, a sleek black car pulled up outside Aunt Rosa's building. The driver, a polite middle-aged man in a neat uniform, opened the door for them without any hint of condescension. "Mrs. Rodriguez, Mr. Nathan, welcome. Mr. Whitmore is looking forward to seeing you." Nathan had never been inside a car this nice. The leather seats were softer than any furniture in their borrowed basement room. There was bottled water in a small cooler, and soft classical music played from speakers he could not see. He caught his mother's eye and saw his own wonderment reflected there. The drive took them out of the city proper, through increasingly affluent neighborhoods, where the houses grew larger and the lawns more manicured with each passing mile. Finally, they turned onto a private road lined with ancient oak trees, their leaves beginning to turn gold and crimson with the changing season. James Whitmore's home was not what Nathan had expected. He had imagined something ostentatious, a mansion designed to intimidate and impress. Instead, they pulled up to a large but tasteful estate, its architecture more warm than imposing, with gardens that looked lovingly tended rather than professionally maintained. James himself opened the front door, which surprised them both. He was dressed casually in slacks and a sweater, looking healthier than he had on the floor of his office, but still somewhat pale, still recovering. "Carmen, Nathan, thank you for coming." His handshake was firm but not aggressive, and he looked them both in the eye as he greeted them. "Please come in, I hope you're hungry. My housekeeper has prepared enough food to feed an army." The interior of the house was beautiful, but lived in, with photographs on the walls and books stacked on tables, and the general sense that this was a home rather than a showpiece. Nathan noticed that many of the photographs showed James with a woman who was no longer present, along with images of what appeared to be a younger version of himself at various corporate events and charity functions. "I realize I owe you both an explanation," James said as he led them to a comfortable sitting room with a fire crackling in the hearth. "And an apology. Several apologies, actually." Carmen and Nathan sat together on a sofa, while James took a chair across from them. Despite his wealth and power, he seemed almost nervous, as if this conversation mattered to him in a way that board meetings and contract negotiations did not. "First, to you, Carmen. You have worked in my building for 3 years. 3 years of keeping my offices clean, of working late nights while I and my executives took for granted that everything would be spotless when we arrived. And in all that time, I never once learned your name. I never once asked about your life, your family, your dreams." He paused, his expression pained. "I grew up poor, you know. My father worked in a factory, and my mother cleaned houses, not unlike what you do now. I remember how it felt to be invisible, to have wealthy people look right through us as if we didn't exist. And somehow, in my climb to success, I became exactly the kind of person I used to resent." Carmen was silent, uncertain how to respond. Nathan could see her processing the apology, weighing its sincerity against years of casual disregard. "The night of my heart attack," James continued, "when your son answered that phone, something broke inside me. Not my heart, though that was damaged too. Something else. A wall I had built without realizing it. A barrier between myself and the people I should have been protecting instead of ignoring." He turned to Nathan. "What you did that night was remarkable. Not just because you saved the Nakamura deal, though you did, but because you showed me what integrity looks like. Real integrity, not the kind they teach in business school. You could have stayed hidden. You could have let that phone ring and protected yourself and your mother from any possible consequences. But instead, you stepped forward because you believed it was the right thing to do." Nathan felt his face flush with a mixture of embarrassment and pride. "I just didn't want Mr. Nakamura to think his time didn't matter, and I remembered what my mom always says about treating everyone with respect." "That's exactly what I mean." James leaned forward intently. "Do you know how rare that is? I have executives who have worked for me for decades who would not have done what you did. They would have calculated the risks, protected their own positions, let someone else deal with the consequences. But you, a 13-year-old boy with everything to lose, you chose to help a stranger who had never even acknowledged your existence." He sat back, his expression shifting to something more businesslike, but still warm. "I did some research this week. About you, Carmen, about your situation. I know you're living with your sister while you work 2 jobs and study for your degree. I know Nathan is in the gifted program at his school, but you can't afford the supplementary materials his teachers recommend. I know you've been turned down for 3 promotions at my company because you lack formal credentials, even though your work is exemplary." Carmen stiffened slightly, uncomfortable with being investigated, with her struggles laid bare before this powerful man. "I don't tell you this to embarrass you," James said quickly. "I tell you because I want you to understand that I know what you're facing, and I want to help." "Mr. Whitmore," Carmen began carefully, "I appreciate your kindness, but I don't need charity. Nathan and I have always worked for what we have. This isn't charity." James's voice was firm. "This is an investment in 2 people who have already proven their value beyond any reasonable doubt." He reached for a folder on the side table and handed it to Carmen. "Inside, you'll find a job offer. Not as a cleaner, but as an administrative coordinator in our operations department. The salary is 3 times what you're currently making, with full benefits and tuition reimbursement for you to complete your degree." Carmen opened the folder with shaking hands. Nathan leaned over to look, his eyes widening at the numbers on the page. "There's also a scholarship fund," James continued, now addressing Nathan directly. A full scholarship to Westbrook Academy, one of the best private schools in the state. Room and board are included if you want them, though I suspect you would prefer to stay with your mother. The scholarship covers all materials, all activities, everything you need to reach your potential. Nathan's mouth dropped open. Westbrook Academy. He had read about it in school newsletters, a place where students went on to attend top universities, where the resources and opportunities were beyond anything available at his public school. Why? Carmen's voice was barely a whisper. Why would you do all this for us? James was quiet for a long moment, looking at the fire rather than at them. When I was Nathan's age, he said finally, my father got sick. Cancer. We had no insurance, no savings, nothing. My mother worked herself to exhaustion trying to keep us afloat. And one night, when everything seemed hopeless, a stranger helped us. A man my father had worked with once years before. He paid for my father's treatment, helped my mother find better work, made sure I could stay in school. He looked back at them, his eyes bright with emotion. That man didn't owe us anything. He helped because he believed that people with means have a responsibility to lift up those who are struggling. He believed that success means nothing if it isn't shared. What happened to your father? Nathan asked quietly. He recovered, lived another 20 years, long enough to see me graduate from college, long enough to watch me build this company. And every day of those extra years was a gift from a stranger who chose kindness when he could have chosen indifference. James stood and walked to the window, looking out at the gardens beyond. I forgot that lesson somewhere along the way. I got so focused on building, on achieving, on competing, that I forgot why any of it mattered. Your son reminded me. In one phone call, with his integrity and his respect and his mother's lessons about human dignity, he reminded me of who I used to be and who I still want to become. Carmen rose from the sofa, clutching the folder to her chest. Mr. Whitmore, this is very generous, but I need time to think. This is a big decision. Take all the time you need. He turned back to them with a gentle smile. There's no pressure, no deadline. The offers will remain open for as long as you need to decide. Can I ask you something? Nathan spoke up, his curiosity overcoming his nervousness. Of course. The man who helped your family. What happened to him? James's smile widened. He became my godfather. And when he passed away, he left me a letter that said the only repayment he ever wanted was for me to help someone else when I had the means to do so. He paused. I've donated to charities, funded scholarships, built hospitals with my name on them. But until now, I never truly helped anyone the way he helped us. Person to person, face to face, one human being seeing another and choosing to make their burden lighter. The housekeeper appeared in the doorway, announcing that dinner was ready. As they walked toward the dining room, James fell into step beside Nathan. You know, Mr. Nakamura asked about you specifically when we finalized the deal. He did? He said that any company that could produce a young person with your values was worth partnering with. He asked me to tell you that he hopes to meet you someday, when you're older. He thinks you have the makings of an excellent businessman. Nathan thought about this as they sat down to a meal that was fancier than anything he had ever eaten, but served with warmth and without pretension. He thought about his mother, who had worked so hard for so long with so little recognition. He thought about Aunt Rosa and their basement room, about his school with its limited resources, about all the barriers that had seemed insurmountable just a week ago. And he thought about a phone call answered in a moment of courage, about the strange chain of events that had brought them to this table, about the way a single act of integrity could ripple outward and change everything. Maybe, he thought, this was what his mother meant when she talked about treating everyone with dignity. Maybe kindness really could come back to you, not because you expected it, but because it was the right way to live. Across the table, Carmen caught his eye and smiled, a real smile that lit up her tired face and made her look younger, lighter, full of hope. Whatever they decided about the job offer and the scholarship, whatever came next, Nathan knew that something fundamental had shifted. They were not invisible anymore. They had been seen, truly seen, by someone with the power to make a difference, and that, more than any amount of money or opportunity, was worth everything. 3 months had transformed everything about Carmen and Nathan's life, yet some things remained beautifully unchanged. Carmen had accepted the position at Whitmore Industries, starting as an administrative coordinator and quickly proving herself indispensable. Her colleagues, initially curious about the former cleaning woman who had been personally recruited by the CEO, soon learned to respect her work ethic, her attention to detail, and her genuine warmth. She had a gift for remembering names and faces, for making people feel valued, for bringing humanity to an often impersonal corporate environment. The tuition reimbursement program allowed her to accelerate her degree, taking evening classes at the local university while working full days at the office. It was demanding, but for the first time, she could see a clear path forward, rather than an endless treadmill of survival. Nathan had started at Westbrook Academy, with the nervous energy of someone entering a world they had only imagined from afar. The other students came from families with names on buildings and country club memberships. They wore clothes that cost more than Carmen's monthly salary had been, and they spoke with the casual confidence of people who had never worried about where their next meal would come from. But Nathan had his own form of confidence, earned through years of struggle and sacrifice, forged in late nights helping his mother study while other kids played video games. He was behind in some subjects, having attended schools with fewer resources, but his intelligence and determination quickly closed those gaps. By the end of the first semester, he was at the top of most of his classes. James Whitmore had become an unexpected presence in their lives. Not intrusive, never overstepping, but consistently supportive in ways that felt genuine rather than obligatory. He attended Nathan's first science fair, sitting in the back row and applauding with visible pride when Nathan won second place for his project on water filtration systems for developing communities. He invited Carmen to sit in on executive meetings, explaining the strategies and decisions that shaped the company, treating her as a protégé rather than a charity case. It was during one of these meetings that the truth about James's past came fully to light. Carmen was reviewing documents in the conference room when she noticed a framed photograph on the credenza, one she had never really looked at during her years of cleaning. It showed a much younger James standing beside an older man with kind eyes and silver hair, both of them grinning at the camera in front of a modest house. "That's my godfather," James said, noticing her gaze. He had entered quietly carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Martin Blackwood, the man I told you about. He looks kind," Carmen observed. "He was. The kindest man I ever knew." James handed her a cup and sat down beside her. "You know, I've been thinking a lot lately about the patterns we inherit. Martin helped my family when we were struggling, and years later I helped yours. But it occurs to me that the chain didn't start with Martin." "What do you mean?" "A few weeks ago, I did some research into Martin's background. I was curious about what had made him the kind of person who would help strangers so generously." James paused, his expression contemplative. "Turns out, when Martin was a young man fresh out of college with nothing but dreams and a willingness to work hard, someone helped him too. An older colleague who saw his potential and advocated for him, who loaned him money to start his first business, who believed in him when no one else would." Carmen felt a chill run down her spine, though she could not say why. "And here's the remarkable part," James continued. "That colleague, the one who helped Martin, his name was Eduardo Rodriguez." The cup of coffee nearly slipped from Carmen's hands. "Rodriguez? That's my family name." "I know. I had my researchers look into it. Eduardo Rodriguez came to this country from Mexico in 1952. He worked as a janitor, then a factory worker, then eventually started his own small manufacturing business. He was known for mentoring young people, for giving opportunities to those who reminded him of himself. One of those young people was Martin Blackwood." Carmen's mind was racing. "But that means you're saying my family." "I'm saying that kindness creates patterns that echo through generations." James's voice was soft but intense. "Eduardo Rodriguez helped Martin Blackwood 50 years ago. Martin helped my family 40 years ago, and now I'm helping yours. The thread connects all of us, Carmen. Your ancestors' generosity created ripples that eventually circled back to his own descendants." Carmen sat in stunned silence, processing the revelation. Her entire life, she had felt that the world was stacked against people like her, that success and opportunity were reserved for those born into privilege, and now she was learning that her own family had once been part of a chain of kindness that spanned half a century. "Does Nathan know?" she finally asked. "Not yet. I thought you should be the one to tell him. But there's something else I need to discuss with you first." James stood and walked to the window, his reflection ghostly against the glass. "My wife passed away 5 years ago. Cancer. We never had children of our own, though we wanted them desperately. After she died, I threw myself into work because it was easier than facing an empty house and an emptier future." He turned back to Carmen. "I'm 58 years old. I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes, but until a few months ago I had no one to share it with. No legacy beyond buildings with my name on them and a company that will outlive me. Mr. Whitmore, James, please. After everything, I think we can use first names. James. Carmen tested the name, still not quite comfortable with the familiarity. What exactly are you saying? I'm saying that you and Nathan have become family to me. Not through blood, not through obligation, but through the same mysterious force that connected Eduardo Rodriguez to Martin Blackwood, to my father to me. He took a deep breath. I want to formally adopt Nathan, not to replace you as his parent, but to add another layer of support, of protection, of opportunity. And I want to ask you, Carmen, if you would consider becoming a permanent part of my life as well. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. You're asking me to marry you? I'm asking you to let me love you. James's voice cracked slightly. These past 3 months, watching you grow into your potential, seeing the woman behind the cleaning uniform, getting to know your hopes and dreams, and the fierce devotion you have for your son. Carmen, I haven't felt anything like this since my wife died. I thought that part of me was gone forever, but you brought it back. Carmen felt tears pricking at her eyes. She thought about the years of loneliness, of putting all her emotional energy into Nathan because there was nothing left for herself. She thought about the basement apartment and the exhausting shifts and the constant worry about whether she was doing enough, being enough, giving enough. And she thought about James, who had started as a faceless name on an office door and had become something she had never expected. A partner, a friend, someone who saw her and valued her for exactly who she was. I need time, she said finally. This is a lot to process. Of course, I'm not asking for an answer today. I just needed you to know how I feel, what I'm hoping for. Whatever you decide, the job is yours. Nathan's scholarship is secure. Nothing changes on that front. This isn't a transaction. This is simply me telling you the truth about my heart. That evening, Carmen sat Nathan down and told him everything. About Eduardo Rodriguez and the chain of kindness spanning generations. About James's proposal. About the possibility of a future she had never dared to imagine. Nathan listened in silence, his young face serious and thoughtful. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Mom, do you love him? The question, so direct and simple, cut through all her complicated thoughts. I think I might, she admitted, but I'm scared. I've been on my own for so long, just the two of us. I don't know how to be part of something bigger. You were part of something bigger at Aunt Rosa's house, Nathan pointed out, and at the company, with your co-workers, and with me. He reached over and took her hand. Mom, my whole life, you've sacrificed everything for me. You gave up sleep and food and fun, and probably 100 things I don't even know about. Don't you think you deserve to be happy too? But what about you? How do you feel about James potentially adopting you? Nathan was quiet again, thinking carefully before he spoke. He's not trying to replace anyone. He's not pretending to be something he's not. He's a good person who wants to be part of our family. He paused. And maybe that's exactly what a family is. Not just the people you're born to, but the people who choose you, the people who show up and stay. Carmen pulled her son into a hug, marveling at how wise he had become. When had he grown up so much? When had the little boy who used to need her for everything become this thoughtful young person who could offer her guidance? When did you get so smart? She murmured into his hair. I had a good teacher, Nathan replied. She always told me that real value is about people, about treating everyone with dignity. I'm just following her example. Outside, the winter night was cold and dark, but inside their small apartment, warmth filled every corner. They stayed like that for a long time, mother and son, thinking about the future that was opening up before them. Carmen made her decision that night, though she would wait until the right moment to share it. Some answers she knew were too important to rush. The next morning, she asked James to meet her at the coffee shop near the office. He arrived looking nervous, which she found endearing. For all his power and confidence in business matters, he was as vulnerable as anyone when it came to matters of the heart. I've been thinking about what you said, Carmen began. About Eduardo Rodriguez, about the chain of kindness, about everything. And I realized something. My whole life, I've been waiting for things to happen to me, waiting for circumstances to improve, for opportunities to appear, for someone to notice me and give me a chance. But that night, when Nathan answered the phone, he didn't wait. He acted. He chose to step forward even when it was scary and uncertain, and could have backfired terribly. She reached across the table and took James's hand. "I don't want to wait anymore. I don't want to be afraid of what might go wrong. I want to be brave, like my son. I want to choose happiness even when it feels risky." She took a deep breath. "Yes, James. My answer is yes." The smile that spread across James's face was brighter than any sunrise. He squeezed her hand, and for a moment neither of them could speak. "I promise," he said finally, "to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret this decision. You and Nathan are going to have everything you deserve, every opportunity, every support, every ounce of love I have to give." "I don't need everything," Carmen said softly. "I just need to be seen, to be valued, to be loved." "That," James replied, "you will have in abundance." From a booth across the coffee shop, Nathan watched his mother and the man who would become his father. He had sneaked out early that morning, curious about how the conversation would go. Now seeing them holding hands, seeing the joy on their faces, he felt something shift in his chest. For so long, it had been just the two of them against the world, and now their small family was about to grow, not through blood, but through something equally powerful, the choice to love and be loved. He thought about Eduardo Rodriguez, the ancestor he had never known, whose generosity had started a chain of events that spanned generations. He thought about the phone call he had answered, the split-second decision that had changed everything, and he made a silent promise to himself that someday, when he was older and had the means to help, he would continue the chain. He would find someone struggling, someone invisible, someone who reminded him of his mother mopping floors in the dead of night, and he would give them the same gift that had been given to his family. Because that, he now understood, was how you changed the world. Not through grand gestures or dramatic interventions, but through small acts of kindness, person to person, generation to generation, creating ripples that could travel farther than anyone could imagine. Nathan smiled, finished his hot chocolate, and slipped out of the coffee shop before his mother could spot him. Some moments, he knew, were meant to be private. 10 years later, Nathan stood at a podium in the grand ballroom of the Whitmore Foundation headquarters, looking out at an audience of 500 people. The room was filled with business leaders, philanthropists, government officials, and, most importantly, the families whose lives had been transformed by the Foundation's work. At 23, Nathan had grown into a confident young man, his mother's determination evident in his bearing, and his adoptive father's business acumen sharpening his mind. He had graduated from Westbrook Academy at the top of his class, then earned degrees in business and social work from Harvard, determined to combine profit with purpose in ways that would honor the legacy that had shaped him. "Thank you all for being here tonight," Nathan began, his voice steady and clear. 10 years ago, I was a 13-year-old boy living in a basement apartment with my mother, a cleaning woman who worked 2 jobs just to keep us afloat. I had no idea that answering one phone call would change everything. He looked toward the front row where Carmen sat beside James, their hands intertwined, their faces radiant with pride. Beside them was James's sister, Margaret, who had become a beloved aunt to Nathan, and several of his former Westbrook classmates who had become lifelong friends. But the true story of our foundation doesn't begin with me. It begins with my great-great-grandfather, Eduardo Rodriguez, who came to this country with nothing but determination and a belief that success meant nothing if it wasn't shared. Eduardo helped a young man named Martin Blackwood, who helped my father's family, who helped mine. And tonight we celebrate the 10,000th family to receive support from the chain of kindness that Eduardo started over 70 years ago. Applause filled the room, but Nathan held up a hand. "I want to introduce you to someone. Her name is Maria Santos. 1 year ago, she was a single mother working as a hotel housekeeper, struggling to make ends meet while raising her 8-year-old son, Diego. She came to the Whitmore Foundation desperate and hopeless, convinced that no one would ever see her, ever value her, ever give her a chance. A woman rose from the 3rd row, her eyes bright with tears. Maria was in her early 30s, dressed in professional attire that reflected her new position as a project manager at one of the Foundation's partner companies. Beside her sat Diego, a bright-eyed boy who was already showing signs of the intelligence that had characterized Nathan at that age. "Maria, would you like to say a few words?" Maria approached the microphone, her hands trembling slightly. "I never thought I would be standing here." A year ago, I was crying in the bathroom of my workplace because I couldn't afford the medication my son needed for his asthma. I didn't know how I was going to keep going, about accepting that this was all my life would ever be. She paused, composing herself. Then I heard about the Whitmore Foundation from another housekeeper. She told me that they helped families like mine, that they didn't judge or look down on us, that they actually listened and treated us with respect. I didn't believe her. I had been let down too many times. Maria turned to look at Carmen, who was crying silently in the front row. Mrs. Whitmore was the one who met with me during my intake interview, and the first thing she said to me was, "I know exactly how you feel. I've been exactly where you are." She didn't offer me charity. She offered me dignity. She helped me find a job that used my skills, arranged for Diego's medical care, connected me with educational opportunities. But most importantly, she believed in me when I had stopped believing in myself. She looked back at the audience. Today, I have a career I'm proud of. My son is thriving in school. We have a home of our own, and I have made a promise that when I am in a position to help someone else, I will do exactly what was done for me, because that's what Mrs. Whitmore taught me. That kindness isn't just about giving. It's about creating a cycle that continues long after you're gone. The applause was thunderous as Maria returned to her seat. Nathan waited for the room to quiet before continuing. The Whitmore Foundation was built on a simple principle, that every person has inherent value regardless of their circumstances, that the cleaning woman and the CEO deserve equal respect and consideration. That success means nothing if it doesn't lift others up. He clicked to a new slide showing the foundation's statistics. Educational scholarships granted, families housed, medical bills paid, businesses started by former recipients who had gone on to create jobs for others. In 10 years, we have invested over $200 million in our communities, but numbers don't capture the real impact. The real impact is Diego, who told me earlier tonight that he wants to be a doctor so he can help kids like him. The real impact is the former janitor, who now runs his own cleaning company and employs 30 people. The real impact is the chain of kindness that keeps growing, link by link, generation by generation. Nathan paused, looking at his parents. When my mother agreed to marry my father, some people whispered that she was after his money, that it was too convenient, too much like a fairy tale. But those people didn't understand what they were witnessing. They saw a wealthy man rescuing a poor woman. What actually happened was two people recognizing the value in each other, creating a partnership built on mutual respect and shared purpose. Carmen was weeping openly now, and James had his arm around her, his own eyes suspiciously bright. My mother taught me that real wealth is measured in character, not currency. My father taught me that success means nothing without significance. Together, they showed me that family isn't just about blood, it's about choosing to love someone and staying through everything that comes. He smiled. There's someone I need to thank publicly, Mr. Takeshi Nakamura, who couldn't be here tonight but is watching via video link from Tokyo. A screen lowered, showing an elderly Japanese gentleman in a traditional room, his face creased with a warm smile. Nakamura-san. Nathan addressed him formally, bowing slightly toward the screen. 10 years ago, you took a chance on a 13-year-old boy who had no business answering a business call. You treated me with respect when you could have dismissed me. You saw value where others might have seen presumption. I have never forgotten your kindness. Nathan-san, Nakamura's voice was strong despite his age, I have watched you grow from a remarkable child into an extraordinary man. The partnership between our companies has been profitable, yes, but the true value has been the friendship between our families. Your father and I speak every month, and I consider him one of my closest friends. This is the legacy we have built together. Thank you, Nakamura-san. Your example has guided me throughout my life. The screen went dark, and Nathan turned back to the audience. I want to end with a story. Last month I was visiting one of our scholarship recipients at her university. As I was leaving the campus, I passed a young boy, maybe 7 or 8 years old, sitting alone on a bench. He looked lost and sad. I almost kept walking, too focused on my schedule, too important to stop. Nathan's voice grew softer. But then I remembered another child many years ago who was also overlooked and invisible. And I stopped. I sat down beside that boy and asked if he was okay. Turns out he was waiting for his mother, who worked in the cafeteria. He was hungry and tired and scared because his mom's shift had run late and no one had come to get him. I sat with him until his mother appeared, breathless and apologetic. She had tears in her eyes because she was so embarrassed that her son had been alone, so worried about what I might think of her parenting. And I told her what my mother once told me, that working hard to provide for your children is not something to be ashamed of. It's something to be proud of. He looked directly at Carmen. I told her that my mother used to bring me to work because she couldn't afford childcare, and that I turned out okay, better than okay. I told her that she was doing an amazing job, that her son was clearly loved, that she should never let anyone make her feel less than because of her circumstances. And then I gave her my card, because that's what we do. We see people, we value them, we help them when we can. Not because we expect anything in return, but because it's the right thing to do. Nathan stepped back from the podium. 10 years ago, I answered a phone call that changed my life. Tonight, I'm asking all of you to answer your own call. Look around you. See the people who are invisible. Listen to their stories. Give them chances. Trust them with opportunities. You never know what extraordinary things might happen when you choose to see the value in someone who has been overlooked. The chain of kindness that Eduardo Rodriguez started 70 years ago now extends to 10,000 families. But it doesn't stop there. It continues with every one of you, every act of respect and dignity you show to someone who needs it. Thank you all for being part of this mission. Thank you for proving that when enough people choose kindness, the world truly can change. The standing ovation lasted for 3 full minutes. Nathan descended from the stage and was immediately enveloped in his mother's arms. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart," Carmen whispered. "Everything I am is because of you, Mum." James joined the embrace, his strong arms wrapping around both of them. "You did good, son." Eduardo would be proud. The reception afterward was full of conversations and connections, donors pledging increased support, recipients sharing their success stories, everyone unified by the common belief that kindness was worth investing in. As the evening wound down, Nathan found himself on the terrace overlooking the city where his mother had once pushed a cleaning cart through empty hallways, dreaming of a better future. Diego, Maria's son, appeared beside him, shy but determined. "Mr. Nathan, can I ask you something?" "Of course, Diego. And just Nathan is fine." "How did you know? How did you know that answering that phone call was the right thing to do?" Nathan smiled, remembering himself at that age, full of questions and uncertainty. "I didn't know, Diego. I was scared. But my mom had taught me that treating people with respect is always the right thing, even when it's hard. So I just did what I thought she would want me to do." "My mom says you're a hero." "I'm not a hero, Diego. I'm just someone who was lucky enough to have people believe in me. And now my job is to believe in other people the way they believed in me." Diego nodded solemnly, processing this information. "When I grow up, I want to help people too." "Then you will, Diego, I have no doubt about that." The boy ran off to find his mother, and Nathan remained on the terrace watching the city lights twinkle in the darkness. Somewhere out there, a mother was working a late shift while her child waited. Somewhere out there, a family was struggling to make ends meet. Somewhere out there, a young person was making a choice that would ripple outward for generations. The chain of kindness continued. And Nathan knew with absolute certainty that it always would. If this story touched something inside you, leave a comment. Sometimes naming what we feel changes more than we imagine. Your comment may help someone who's silently struggling today.